Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are super excited to see you today and to introduce our presenter. So I'm Jennifer Tersini. I know most of you know me. Own and operate Raise the Bar Consulting. We offer comprehensive and integrated fundraising, organizational development, and transitional leadership solutions. Really glad to be here today with all of you. And without further ado, really excited to have Stephen Shattuck with us with Bloomerang. He is going to be talking about the current state of donor retention and what you can do about it, which is just so very important and way too easy for nonprofits to skip over when they're really busy. So I think I'm just going to pass the baton and have Stephen introduce himself in any additional way he'd like and just get started here today. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. And thanks, Cynthia, for setting it all up. Cool to be with you all. Hope you're having a good day. And yeah, donor retention, my favorite topic. So we're going to have some fun here. And I was telling Cynthia before, we're getting a really bad storm here in Indianapolis. So if I disappear, I'll try to come right back. But like you heard, I'm over here at Bloomerang. We're a donor management provider. If you've never heard of us, check us out. Not really going to talk about that beyond that little plug, but basically what I do for Bloomerang is this kind of thing. Do a lot of research, talk to a lot of customers. We do a lot of surveys. We sponsor external research. I'll talk about some of that stuff too. Basically, we're all about helping nonprofits, even if you don't use our software. So that's what we're all about here. So one of the organizations that we're involved with, actually that I've been volunteering with almost 10 years now, is a group that studies donor retention every single year. And if you've never heard of them, check them out. They're called the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, FEP for short. They're a really neat collaboration between AFP, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and the Urban Institute. And story here is back around 2005, 2006, they got together and had this goal of, okay, we want to study donor retention. We want to know how well nonprofits here in the States are doing at retaining donors from one year to the next. So when we talk about donor retention, we mean, okay, what percentage of donors who gave to us in 2019 came back again and gave in 2020? And like Jennifer says, it's a really important metric because it so much flows from that percentage rate. Your lifetime value of donors, revenue, even fundraising costs can kind of be inferred by your retention rate. So it's an important topic, and it's cool that we have this entire think tank studying it. So what they do is FEP collaborates with many of the leading donor management software providers. So Bloomerang's one of them. Others that maybe you've heard of or even use now, Donor Perfect, Neon. Even though we're all competitors, we actually all collaborate on this project, which I think is pretty cool, right? It's not too often you hear competitors, working together on something. But we send our anonymous customer data, basically the transaction data, to FEP, and they crunch all those numbers, and they release a report every year that shows how well those nonprofits who use those systems are doing at retaining donors from, like I said, one year to the next. And since 2005, this has really grown to be a pretty big data set, billions of dollars in transactions, tens of thousands of nonprofits. We're also now, as of last year, working with Giving Tuesday. So we're getting some really interesting online giving data from them as well. So it's not every nonprofit, it's not all 1.5 million nonprofits or whatever it is, but it's a pretty good slice of the pie. And I think it's pretty indicative of the sector as a whole. So this is the most recent data we have. This is from the report, the 2021 report that came out just a few months ago. It's still pretty recent. Looking at how many people who gave in 2019 came back again in 2020. So it's always about a year behind, right? Because you have to get through the whole year and then they need a couple months to crunch the numbers. But this is where we stand right now. So the average retention rate, about 44%. So about 44% of the donors who gave in 19 came back in 2020. And you'll see here in a minute, but for the most part, that's been status quo, kind of 42 to 46%-ish is usually where we land at any given year of this report. doesn't fluctuate very much, maybe goes up or down a percentage point every year, but it's kind of like that 2% of GDP, right? That fundraising represents, doesn't really change very much, if at all. But there are a couple other metrics that we have seen some fluctuations in. Biggest one being the first time retention rate. So that average number, that 44%, that's any donor in those systems, whether they were giving $5 or $5 million, whether they have given twice or 20 times, event donors, online donors, everyone is kind of rolled up into that number. But when you look at just first time donors, so people who gave their first gift in 2019, only about 19% of those people came back and gave again in 2020. So kind of significantly lower than the average rate, right? For whatever reason, it's harder, and it's getting harder to retain first-time donors, to get that second gift from people. So one of the things we're going to talk about over the next hour is specifically how to do that, because it's you need the second gift to get the third gift and every subsequent gift. But you can see the good news is if you get a second gift, if you get a repeat donation from someone, those retention rates go into the 60th percentile practically. And then monthly donors tend to have retention rates of high 80s, low 90s. So one really good thing for retention that we'll talk about is having a robust monthly giving program. If you got someone giving monthly, kind of hard to lose them, but very, very easy to lose a first-time donor. Most new donors do not make a second gift, and we're going to talk about that specifically. So that's where we're at. And like I said, that average rate really hasn't changed very much, 45%, 47, 44, 45, 44. It's kind of interesting to look at those very minor fluctuations, but for the most part, that's status quo. And I show this because I think there's a real opportunity for nonprofits to, like Jennifer said, which I love, to focus on this, because it is very easy to overlook. And I think that, there's an opportunity to perhaps outperform, and I say that very shrewdly, some of the competing organizations in your community, because the ones who do focus on retention, they're generating a lot more revenue from their donors than the ones who aren't. But like I said, we are a little concerned at the downward trajectory of some of those other metrics, particularly first-time retention. That was around 25% back in 2015, and now it's below 20%. For the first time. So we're keeping an eye on that. There's a lot of theories on that. My personal belief is that there's a couple of things going on. It's never been easier to become a donor, right? That barrier to entry for donating has never been lower. You can give a gift online, you can text to give, you can click Facebook donate button, in 2 seconds you're donating later. That's good because the acquisition costs on those channels tends to be somewhat low. Peer-to-peer fundraising is another one. But I think the flip side is sometimes those gifts are very transactional and kind of spur of the moment, and it can be hard to steward those donors, right, and communicate with them after the gift. Especially some of those channels, you don't even get the donor information. So I think there's kind of a push-pull going on there that may be affecting that rate. But we're going to talk about how to mitigate some of those things going forward here. So who cares? Maybe you're sitting there like, okay, I don't care if it's 44% or 20% or, what's actually happened there. Well, there are very tangible effects on your list of donors, your database at those rates. This is a quick illustration of kind of how fast your pool of donors evaporates year over year. So this bottom row is a 40% retention rate or a 60% attrition rate. So just kind of looking at the inverse. So a little bit below average, but kind of in the ballpark. Let's say you have 1,000 donors in your Bloomerang or your Razor's Edge or whatever you're using. Well, at a 40% retention rate, 600 people are gone after 1 year. And then over the course of 4 or 5 years, you're down to just 10 donors from that original pool of 1,000. So every 5 years or so, you're basically starting over from scratch in terms of acquisition. You got to go out and get 990 new donors just to break even. So we kind of get caught in this acquisition treadmill, right? Versus, okay, let's focus on retention, and then we don't have to do as much acquisition work. Now, acquisition is still very important. That's not the point of this presentation. Don't stop acquisition. Please hear me clearly. Do not stop it. But if you can offset those negative effects of low retention rates, you're going to get more bang for your buck. And you'll see here in a couple of slides that it's cheaper to retain a donor. It's easier typically. Now, there are some things you have to do, certainly, but I think most importantly, it's more fun to retain someone you already have, because you've already gone through the hard work of introducing yourself and then making that case. Should be easier than convincing a straight up stranger to donate to you. So that's what happens to your database. What about dollars, right? We all want to raise money, obviously, at the end of the day. A small change in retention means a lot of extra dollars is the thing I really want to impart on you. It does not take 20, 30%, or doubling your retention rate. 1 or 2% can be thousands of dollars. This is an illustration of two pretend organizations. One has a 41% rate and one has a 51% rate. Now, at a certain database size and at a certain average gift size, that organization with just a 10% higher rate, you can see they're raising almost $500,000 more from those retained donors than their counterpart at just 41%. Now, this is assuming, potentially people upgrading and again, a certain database size, but it does not take much of an improvement to make a difference. Sometimes like boomerang customers will email me or tweet me and say, hey, we went from 47% to 48%. I get excited because I know that could be thousands of dollars more money over the lifetime of those people giving. It really does kind of compound, not dissimilarly from your interest in your bank account. Now, one thing that this slide doesn't illustrate, which might be even more compelling, is these people are giving longer and that money is compounding, like I said, but maybe they're doing other things because they're sticking around so long. Maybe they're also volunteering for you or fundraising for you through like peer-to-peer. Maybe they're serving on a board or a committee, writing you into their will, perhaps. I'll get into that in a second. But there's lots of benefits to keeping people over the long term besides just those additional dollars. Now, that's the average rate. The same thing happens if you improve your first time rate. I know this is super busy, but again, it's just comparing a 20% first time rate to a 30% first time rate. So again, if you can tweak that number and improve it, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars again over the lifetime. So 100% retention is not the goal. You're not going to get to 100%. You may not even get to 60%, but can you move from 40 to 45%, or on the first time side, 19 to 23 or 24? That can make a really big difference. And there's so many other benefits to having higher retention beyond what I've already talked about. Although I did allude to this, plan giving. Your best plan giving prospects are people who have been in your database for many years, giving many years consecutively. This is research from the late great Jerry Panis. He looked at all of the bequests that he had generated for his clients and looked at kind of what made all those people tick, thinking that, are they just wealthy people? Are they older people? But what he found is those things were at the bottom of the list. The most people who were, or the people who were most likely to leave a bequest were, like I said, they had been in the database giving, they had been retained, and they had done other things, right? It was okay if they missed a year or two, every other year or so, but monthly donors, people who give multiple gifts within a year, not to mention doing other things like maybe volunteering or being involved in the mission in some ways. So if you are not just someone who cares about planned gifts, but even major gifts, those retained people are the best prospects. You're not just going to get $1 million from some rich stranger that you never talked to. It's those people that have been giving $100, a couple $100 every single year, like clockwork. So a lot of this is not just, okay, how do we improve our retention rates, but maybe we should also pay attention to the people we have retained. I'm guessing that in all of your databases, there are people that are maybe flying under the radar, right? They've been giving $25 a year, a couple times a year for 10, 15 years. Let's talk to those people. Those could be very interesting prospects for things like, a capital campaign pledge, your bequest marketing. Those are people you want to keep an eye on, regardless of how much they gave. It doesn't matter what the dollar amount is necessarily. What matters is that they have been giving consistently over a long period of time. So I'd invite you to maybe investigate that. in your own databases, because you may be surprised what could be kind of lurking undercover there. And I alluded to this before, but again, it's cheaper, it's easier in terms of response rates to retain or renew a donor than it is to acquire a completely new donor. So, if you maybe need any argument fodder or ammo to go to your boss or your board and say, hey, maybe we should focus on retention, this might be also very compelling to them. So that's where we currently stand. And I give this presentation every year and show the updated data, but this presentation really hasn't changed very much over the last decade, other than updating those percentage points, slightly, because this is kind of where we're at. I think the more important conversation is, what do we do about it? We have really good research on this as well. Not only do we know where we stand, but we also kind of know what makes donors tick. Why do they keep giving? Why do they stop giving? And I want to show you a couple pieces of research on this. Not all the research that exists. There's a ton of donor loyalty research out there that basically comes to around the same conclusions. The one I always go to is from Adrian Sargent. He's like the godfather of donor retention. He's been studying donor retention for many, many years, longer than FEP has even been around. And he did kind of a landmark study back in 2001. And if you bristle at that date, don't worry, we're going to kind of move forward in time to more recent research. Again, I think you'll see that donors over the last, century or so haven't really changed their motivations for giving or not giving. But this one was pretty illuminating. He surveyed a large list of lapsed donors from about 10 super large nonprofits here in the United States, basically just asking them one simple question. Hey, you used to give these orgs, now you no longer do. What happened? Why did you stop giving? So pretty simple question. And these are the top responses that he got from those lapsed donors. He had enough of them respond to be, statistically relevant. And I know all the percentages don't add up to 100%. Donors could, or respondents could select multiple reasons, and they kind of combine similar reasons into one here. But these are the most commonly responded to reasons. So 5% said, this charity doesn't seem to need me, so I'm going to stop giving. So maybe they stopped asking. Maybe the case for support was perhaps missing the mark there, wasn't compelling. So they stopped giving because they didn't think they were needed. 8%, and this is a concept we're going to come back to a couple times here before three Pacific, is they wanted to know how the donation was used specifically. How was that money invested into the cause? Now, I'm not recommending that you are designating every single gift to a very, very specific purpose. Like, hey, your $5 went towards, 2% of our electric bill. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. But this aspect of storytelling, or concept of storytelling, and telling the donor, hey, these are the great things that we've been doing through donor support, to improve our mission or further our cause. That storytelling is really, really critical to donor engagement and retention. We're going to see that come up in several other pieces of research here going forward. So the things you put in your newsletter, maybe the things you post on Facebook, keep doing it, do more of it, put it everywhere. You can't tell too many of these impact stories. The families you're serving, the dogs you're getting adopted, the environment you're protecting, tell those stories. It really is a critical piece of getting these donors really hooked on giving to you. 9% didn't remember donating, which always kind of strikes me as weird. Although if you look at the next one, a pretty big chunk, 13% never got thanked. No thank you. Now, not like a personal thank you or a fast thank you. No thank you at all. So those top four, which adds up to, I think, close to 40%. I was an English major, not a math major, but I'm just eyeballing it. That's a pretty big chunk. And you're not going to get all 40% necessarily, but there's an opportunity in those top four reasons to improve those rates. And I kind of sum it up as stewardship: the storytelling, the thanking of the donor, making sure that what you're communicating to them is making sense for who they are. I think that's the biggest opportunity. We can't do much about people passing away. Can't really do anything about people having financial difficulties. That 54%, that's always the top reason. But that poor service and communication, It's kind of a way to sum up the top 4. So there is an opportunity there. And I think it primarily lies in stewardship. So we're going to talk about that here going forward. But what about organizations that are high performing? What about organizations with high retention rates? What are they doing well to make those rates happen? We have research on this as well. There was a study done back in 2011 by a really cool group called the Donor Voice. They do lots of really interesting research. I would invite you to check them out. They got a cohort of nonprofits together and surveyed their most loyal donors. So people that had been giving for many years in a row, multiple gifts within a year, upgrades, things like that, soft credits, kind of the cream of the crop people. And they asked them a simple question: why do you keep giving? What are these nonprofits doing well to keep you in the fold? And rather than it being open-ended, they actually gave them a list of reasons and asked them to kind of stack rank them. And I wanted to share with you the top 7 reasons that were given by these loyal donors for a couple of reasons. If you do these 7 things, I feel very strongly that you're going to improve your rates, your retention rates. The other thing is they represent kind of the exact inverse of those response that we saw from Sargent's survey. It's pretty uncanny, actually. So these are the top 7. We'll kind of go through these quickly here. Number 1 is that the donor thinks you're effective. Now, you have done something to communicate that back to the donor. And I think the primary thing you do there is storytelling. These are the families we're helping. These are the kids we're putting through college. You know, this is the species that was endangered and now is thriving and doing okay. Whatever those things are, constantly be telling that back to the donor and making them feel good. I know all of you listening are effective organizations. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be investing in your own, success like you are now by doing things like this. But are you communicating that? That's usually where we fall short. So not just in your newsletter, but in your appeals and your thank yous, in everything, social media, events, make sure you're really keeping that steady drumbeat going. 2 is a little different than the rest, and I think that bears some attention. Donors don't like to be caught off guard by anything that you send them. It's a good idea to tell donors what it is they can expect to receive from you in the future or in subsequent communications. I'll show you some examples of what that looks like, because it can be a little ethereal of a concept, perhaps. Segmentation plays into the part of that. We're going to talk a little bit about segmentation here in a minute. 3 is my favorite. Donors want to be thanked, of course, but the speed of the gift acknowledgement has been shown to be a driver of retention. And we have some specific other research, not from this study, but from other studies that show how fast you should thank a donor and what impact that has. So donors don't want to wait around for weeks and months for a thank you. I know this seems like maybe a little needy, and you can go overboard into donor worship for sure. I don't do that. That's not what I want you to do. But can you get that thank you at the door within a couple of days of the gift? Can you call them, say thanks? We'll talk about those things, but it does seem to make an impact the faster you do it. 4, I think, is also interesting. Surveying your donors. Donors like it to be asked questions. I know we all get inundated with surveys from like every business that we even walk by, let alone buy something from. But it seems to be different among donors. They like to think, oh, they care what I think. I'm invested in this organization, and it seems to be, a likewise situation. So we'll talk about donor surveys as well. Not only does it make them feel good that you're asking, but any answers you get back from them, you can kind of put into practice and communicating to them going forward. So we'll talk about that. 5 through 7, these concepts kind of start to be a little bit redundant. Donor feels like they're part of an important cause, you're effective, you're an important cause. I think the nuance there is being kind of part of that story. So donor centricity, I think, comes into play here. And again, you can go overboard, you can be too donor centric, and there's a lot of smart people talking about this. So I'm not suggesting that you're throwing parades for every donor or giving them too much power, but weaving them into the story, making them feel like a little bit of a change agent. I think there are ways to do that are not inequitable or problematic. And I'll show you some examples of those. Appreciation, again, donors want to be thanked, they want to be appreciated. And then 7, the stories, again, who's being helped, what's being helped, who are the kids you're helping, who are the families you're feeding. Again, the storytelling. So even though there's 7 things here, it really comes down to thanking, segmented communications. We'll talk about, getting to know donors. I think sometimes we're not real curious about our donors, which is a shame because they're all very different. And that could help us improve communicating to them if we knew those things. The storytelling piece, like I said, communicating that impact, those outcomes that you're producing. And then of course, monthly giving is, we could talk all afternoon about monthly giving alone, but if you want high retention rates, it's kind of hard to do without at least a little bit of a monthly giving program going. So there's lots of ways that we could approach this, and I've already burned through my hour. I think that there's a few things that represent good starting points or kind of low-hanging fruit that you can do to kind of get started on this. And my number one thing is always segmentation. I think segmentation represents kind of the best bang for your buck in terms of efforts that help retention. And it's a little bit of a mouthful, but basically what we're talking about here is you are communicating to different types of donors in different ways. Now, all of the donors in your database, there's some different people in there, right? You've got people who have never given, you've got prospects in there, you've got people who have lapsed, you've got people who have been giving to you like clockwork that love you. You've got first-time donors that maybe, are kind of just getting started in that relationship. And they all give for different reasons, some of which may be very personal. So getting to that information and then communicating to all those people differently, whenever I see high retention rates, at least among our customers, segmentation is always something that I see that they are doing. It's kind of hard to win at retention without segmentation. So let me show you an example. This is a customer of ours, super awesome. Heather, she runs a public school foundation up in New York State. She's like the queen of segmentation. So she's got all of these different types of people in the database kind of defined and is talking to them in different ways. So for example, they're a school foundation, like I said, and so they have a lot of different types of people who donate. They've got parents of kids in the system, grandparents of kids, the alumni themselves that have gone on and grown into adulthood. And then they got people who live in Skaneateles who they don't have kids, so they don't send kids to those schools. Their kids are aged, they're grown out of it. How they communicate to all those people is different because the case for support is by definition different for those people. One letter may read, hey, Stephen, as the father of a 4th grader in our system, the value of the education we're providing. I want to give you a chance to make that happen for the next generation of parents, versus another letter where it's like, hey, Cynthia, you may not know about us, but we're the school foundation here in your city. You probably don't want to live somewhere with crappy schools. Would you consider donating? Now, I'm not a great copywriter, but I think you can see the different angle that those are taking. Because when you take a one-size-fits-all approach, try to be all things to all people, much more likely that the response rates are going to dwindle there. And that's just persona. Then she's also got it by donor history, right? Are they a prospect, first-time donor, lapsed donor, monthly donor? They give every single year, saying different things to those people. Usually all it amounts to at a minimum is, communicating that back to the donor. Thanks for your first gift. Thanks for being a monthly donor. Hey, we miss you. We'd love to have you back. A prospect, it may read differently. Donors like it when you tell them what kind of donor they are. It shows that you're paying attention, but it will also kind of help you contextualize what you want to communicate to those people. Because what you say to a first-time donor probably should be very different than what you say to someone that's been giving to you for a decade, right? You know them and they love you. What is the differentiation there that's happening? So I know this can seem kind of overwhelming. It's like, holy smokes, I got to have 10 different letter templates. Maybe, but they're not going to be wildly different. For the most part, it's just, contextualizing it for where they are, which segment they're in. And if that still seems overwhelming, I understand. I would start with first-time donors. If you have first-time donor communications and then everything else, you're going to be way ahead of most people, honestly, because the fact that you're at least splitting it once, most people don't do. And I like first-time donors because that rate is so low, right? And you saw the impact in my illustration of what can happen if you improve that rate. But the other reason is first-time donors are uniquely unique, for lack of a better phrase. They're new. You don't know them probably very well. They may not even know you very well. There's a very contextual reason for speaking to them differently. I want to welcome them. Thanks for your first gift. How'd you hear about us? Why are you interested in our cause? Welcome to the family. We're so happy to have you. Those are very unique things that you would probably never say to another donor. So it's sort of easy to set up that communication stream because it's kind of self-evident, what you would want to say there. So we looked at our customers that had higher than average retention rates for first-time donors. We kind of looked at, okay, what are they doing with those people? And we sort of coalesced what we found into this communications template, which you should consider using when you get the slides here. And you may want to move and adjust some things around based on how your organization operates. This isn't going to fit universally for everyone, but there are some things that I would recommend you do early on in that relationship. One is thanking as soon as possible and kind of welcoming them, right? If you do a welcome kit or maybe a welcome thank you letter, great. You're already doing segmentation, like you're well on your way. That's good. Welcome them to the family. Send that thank you. Phone calls in particular we found to be very impactful for brand new donors. Now, you're not always going to get a phone number. So if you don't get one, don't worry. Maybe it's an email or a handwritten note, but something very personal early on to kind of surprise them, because it's very rare to get that from any nonprofit, let alone from your first gift. And I think it will stand out and kind of set that stage going forward. A couple other interesting things we recommend: a survey. So we saw that from the research, right? That was the number 4 thing donors kind of like to express their views. Perfect for a first-time donor. You don't know them. They may not know much about you. Hey, how did you hear about us? What's your interest in the cause? How easy was it to donate today? Maybe if it's an electronic donation and a survey. Really, really valuable information. Now, you're not going to get everyone to respond. For us, it's 10, 12% response rate. That's okay. That's good. That's about the average. But that 10 or 12%, not only are you going to get some good information from them, but because they responded, they're sort of self-selecting into a more engaged group just by doing that. So that's something you could try as well. And then a tour invitation. So again, they're new to you as well, but if they can maybe come on site, even virtually, that's okay. Or attend a live stream or something like that and see your mission in action, that's super sticky, and if they're there with you, even virtually, you may even have some chit chat with them and maybe learn a little bit more about them, similar to what you would have gotten from a survey. So those 2 things are really powerful within maybe that first month. Now, they're probably also getting kind of your newsletter automatically every month, maybe weaving in a standalone stewardship piece where it's just, hey, you're mailing them a quick note and there's a photograph, paper clipped it, hey, just wanted to share something cool that happened at our organization. We're thinking about you, thanks so much for being a donor, something like that. If you do all those things, make them feel real good, get to know them, it's okay. In fact, it's maybe a really good thing to ask them to donate again within the first 90 days. We have kind of identified that that's a little bit of a honeymoon period. I know that seems aggressive. I know it seems soon, but if you do these touch points leading up to that, you may be surprised the high response rates you get from that second appeal. You don't have to wait a year. You don't have to wait till the holidays to ask them again, or your next campaign or whatever. So try it. Consider creating something like this that first-time donors are going to get from you, because you may find that it has a pretty good impact there. Now, the phone call, I usually get a little bit of pushback on that being the first thing. There is a lot of interesting research out there on phone calls. They improve retention rates, they quadruple it. Penelope Burke is a big believer of this. Her research shows that if a board member calls a donor, they give more in their second gift. So we kind of noticed this at Bloomerang, like these kinds of little stories floating around, but we wanted to put it to the test. So we looked at our customers who called first-time brand new donors versus the ones who didn't, and did it make a difference? And we found that it made quite a heck of a difference, actually. Organizations that made one thank you phone call to brand new donors, they went from 33% to 41% first-time retention, so not too bad there. If they called multiple times within the first 90 days, again, still thank you or stewardship phone calls, that went up to 58%. So you're kind of knocking on the door of the repeat retention rate, let alone that 19-20% rate that is the national average. So again, if you get a phone number, if you don't get a phone number, don't go looking for it or call their office. I'm not suggesting that, but the ones you do get, especially if it's unrequired or unsolicited, you might want to call that person if it's their first gift. Now, our data did not differentiate between voicemails and live pickups. I would guess most of these went to voicemail, still impactful. I can count on one hand in the 20 years I've been an adult that how many times I've gotten a thank you phone call from a nonprofit, let alone the first gift. It will stand out. It's kind of like a digital thank you in a lot of ways. Now, not only did retention rates improve, but the second gift came in faster from the cohort of donors that were called versus the ones who gave a second time but were not called. So you went from almost 3/4 of a year to under 2 months. So again, there does seem to be that honeymoon period in that first 90 days. And they gave more. On average, they gave about $50 more in the second gift. So phone calls, I'm going to say segmentation and phone calls, if you do nothing else, those are maybe some good starting points. Now, I know it's like, oh, geez, I got to call donors. Like, I'm overwhelmed already. Carve out some time. Maybe it's 20 minutes on Friday. Run a report in your database. All the new donors who gave this week, get your call list. Take out the people who didn't give you a phone number. It's okay. And call them. The more you do it, I think the faster and easier it will get for you. And by the way, you can ask board members. In fact, Penelope found that board members are the best people. So give them the list. Give them some talking points, some loose scripts there. And you may find that the board members really gravitate towards that and kind of fall in love with the activity there. And I said this before, but welcome kits, welcome letters, something that you only send to a brand new donor. It would make no sense to send it to anyone else. That's when you know that you're doing good segmentation, where it's like, oh, dang, I can't send this to anyone else. That's when you know you're in a good spot. I love this one. This is one where, again, thank you for your first gift. Tell the donor, thanks for being a monthly donor. Thanks for giving on Giving Tuesday. Thanks for joining the family. Tell them what kind of donor they are. There's a tour invitation here, which I love. This is another one where I got this when I joined a monthly donor program. Yeah, I love that, Jennifer. Yeah, set aside the time. Like, if you don't set aside the time, it's not going to happen, right? This is one, my first gift was a monthly donation. So I started a monthly commitment. Dang, if that happens, please do something for those people, because to give for the first time and start monthly, that's pretty significant. The handwritten note is the call out here, just something to show that it wasn't just spit out of a printer. Include a little brochure, some more information, or sticker, something easy that isn't gonna make the envelope bulky or increase postage. But I like that because again, they're new. They may not totally understand all the things you do yet. So it's okay to educate them a little bit, even though they're already a donor. This one I thought was pretty smart. It's still the only time I've ever gotten something like this, but this organization does a print newsletter on a quarterly basis, which print newsletters are awesome, by the way. Those are like money factories. But I had donated in between issues. And as my first gift, they did all the things I've talked about already, but they also said, hey, here's our last newsletter. So you don't have to wait a couple months till the next one, just so you can kind of see what we've been up to. So talk about storytelling. I mean, that was just chock full of awesome stories. So I thought that was pretty clever as well. Surveys. Again, surveys can be segmented, right? You might want to have a first-time donor survey, maybe a survey for monthly donors, a survey for your annual kind of like clockwork people that ask different questions. At first-time donors, you might want to focus on how they heard about you, why they care about you. Whereas engaged, loyal donors, it's more about, hey, how are we doing? Communicating to you. Maybe a little bit more about how they feel about you versus how they feel about the cause or how they found you. But don't let technology get in the way. There's so many providers of surveys. We have it in Bloomerang, but there's SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, even paper surveys sent in the mail can be really effective as well. And I call it out because that was the number 4 thing, right? Giving that opportunity to donors. So maybe a couple weeks after they donate for the first time, hey, we'd love to get to know you. There's other sneaky places you can put a survey besides just emailing one. You could put a survey on the thank you page of your online donation form. They fill out the form, they donate, they're taken to that page, and maybe there's a little box there that like, hey, what prompted your gift today? That's a survey technically. 5 questions tops. You don't want to overwhelm them. You don't want to make them feel like it's a mortgage application or something like that. But did we thank you well enough? Are we communicating the right things? How easy was it to donate? There's lots of different questions you can ask different types of people. And I've got some sample surveys on the Bloomerang blog if you're curious about that. But again, I would start with first-time donors. I think the number 1 thing is, why do you care about the cause for first-time donors? Because what happens so often is, let's say you got 2 donations today, and both of them gave $20, both of them gave online, and they're both first-time donors. Those people in the database look really similar, right? But one person may have given for a completely different reason than the other. And if you can get that piece of information, that's really golden. You can communicate to those 2 people differently, rather than kind of guess what they care about. And for those of you listening, if you have a really kind of wide service offering, I'm thinking of like an environmental group where you're touching a lot of different types of things. It may be even more critical to get that information. Like World Wildlife Fund, for example, they send a new member survey where it's like, hey, what areas of conservation are you interested in? Rainforest, ocean, endangered species. They list all those, and then they kind of tailor the communications going forward. So really critical if you kind of, cast a wide net in your services. But even if you don't, if you're an animal shelter, it could be like, are you a dog or a cat person? That could be good too. So don't feel limited if you're small. I don't mean to discourage anyone. There's still some good things you can ask there. Other interesting data. I shared one retention study with you, but there are others. Basically come to very similar conclusions, but maybe look at different things. This retention study from Target Analytics, I always kind of like to look at because they always look at some interesting things. They look at retention rates by age and by channel of giving. So a couple of things here. There are really no significant differences in retention rates by age demographic. A boomer is just as likely to be as loyal as a Zoomer, right? That's kind of a myth, right? Sometimes there's this thing where like, oh, millennials and younger people are less loyal or more fickle. Data does not bear that out. Where we do see differences in retention is by channel of giving, specifically online donations. Online donations, and this is kind of what my theory was based on the first time side, those have lower retention rates than offline, which is anything that's not online. So events, direct mail. So if, again, you want to improve retention, there's one piece of low-hanging fruit, which is your online giving, specifically what happens after someone gives online. So my homework for you all tonight, besides doing some segmentation, brainstorming, is donate to yourself online. Give yourself $5 and look very critically at what you get from yourself after donating, specifically that first automatic email receipt. Is it a scary looking receipt like this one? Or is it a nice thank you that you could actually, print and send in the mail and still have it look like a nice thank you? A lot of times these receipts are very kind of boring, robotic, sometimes scary, barely say thank you. And it looks like we bought a gallon of milk from these nonprofits versus a nice gift acknowledgement that, even though it's automatic and automated and everybody gets it no matter how much they donate, it's still really nice. It does things from that research I showed you. It says thank you, tells a story, tells the donor what comes next, right? A tax letter with details of your gift will be sent to the address you provided next month. That service recipient photo, give the donor something to do, visit social media, go back to the website to watch a video or whatever, impact stories, make that donor feel good. It's okay, even though it's automatic. And then the thank you page, does that say thank you? It's that page that people get sent to right after they click donate, fill out the form. Very oftentimes we leave people hanging there as well. So look at those two things. Are you kind of setting the stage? Because if it's a first time donation, that may be the first thing they ever see or get from your organization. And you don't want it to be lackluster or robotic or make it feel very transactional. So go through that exercise. I think it might be very, very illuminating for you. Now, I've said this once, but again, you're not going to get to 100% retention. It's not the goal. There are a couple types of donors that have really low retention rates, even lower than first-time donors. I'll give you a second. Put in the chat if you can guess what they are. I'll give you a hint. It's not event donors. A lot of people say event donors. Actually, event donors have pretty good retention rates from what I've seen. Any guesses there? I won't belabor it, but the two I'm thinking of are kind of similar. Actually, they're very similar, but they don't seem like it off the bat. Memorial peer-to-peer, single-digit retention rates. Now, this is not meant to discourage you from pursuing those channels. It's very worth your time, I think, because the cost of acquisition on those channels is typically very low, and that kind of offsets the low retention rates. So it's okay. But I see a lot of fundraisers kind of tie themselves into knots trying to retain these people, and it may not be worth the time and energy. Here's why. They're not actually giving to you, usually. Now, there's some exceptions, but they're giving to their friend, right? Their buddy who's doing a Facebook fundraiser or chose you at the funeral home for their loved one who passed away, or is doing a 5K for you and sharing it on Facebook or email. They're giving to their friend. They might not even know who you are, what you do. And a lot of times we just kind of swoop in after that gift and kind of act like that person's best friend. They're not going to give again, usually. Now, you can be a little proactive. That thunderstorm's really kicking up. I hope you can't hear it. Sorry if you can, but I'm almost done. So there are some things you can do. One thing we've seen work really well is weave in that fundraiser. So maybe even the thank you letter comes from them. So the thank you letter could be like, hey, Jennifer, thanks so much for donating to my 5K. By the way, this is the nonprofit that I was raising money for, that your gift benefited. This is why I support them. I'd love for you to consider supporting them in the future. That may be a way to kind of pick some of these people off, but don't tie yourself into knots, okay? Especially Facebook. I see every day, I see people posting in the forums like, oh, I don't get the donor information. How do we get that? Where do I go on Facebook to get that? Don't worry about it. Those people are not going to give to you again, by and large. What I tell people is focus all that energy on the fundraiser, the person who raised money for you on Facebook, because you want to thank them. They brought in the $300. It wasn't their, college roommate from Des Moines that you should be worrying about. The fundraiser. Make them feel appreciated because you want them to do it again. Do it again on Giving Tuesday, do it on their next birthday. That's free money, right? It costs you very, very little to acquire those gifts. So focus on the fundraiser, not those individual peer-to-peer donors. But, don't totally give up on them. Maybe consider, like I said, weaving in the third-party person. And this is not at all to disparage peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is awesome. It is a great way to raise a lot of money kind of quickly and easily, but focus on the fundraiser. Set them up for success, give them what they need, thank them afterwards. But the person they went to high school with 30 years ago who doesn't know you and doesn't care about your cause, take their money and run with it. Honestly, I feel bad. I'm the retention guy and I'm telling you not to worry about retention, but there are some areas where you don't want to worry about it too much. And then the last thing, the people who stop giving, because there's going to be some of them, because you're not going to get to 100% retention. What do we do with those people? So a couple of schools of thought here. And I'm going to say something kind of bluntly. I work for a database company and we all charge by how many people you have in the database. So, you're going to hear a lot from people like us to say, yeah, hang on to all your donors because you never know when they're going to come back. Now, let me kind of speak against my own interests here. The most people, if they miss 1 or 2 years, the average recapture rate of them coming back, 4 to 6%. So once they're gone, they're probably gone. But I still recommend people hang on to some of those people because you can be proactive. Again, you can survey them. Hey, we miss you. So there are lapsed donor surveys that can be really effective and bring some people back. You can also maybe invest some money in the quality of your data, right? People move every year. Actually, a pretty good chunk of Americans move every single year. Maybe they just stop getting your stuff, but they still really like you. So an NCOA, that's a national change of address, couple $100, few $100, it'll tell you if your addresses are out of date and update them. Again, a good ROI on that once a year, maybe even a couple times a year, maybe before a big campaign or a mailing. I don't sell these things, by the way, so I'm not, this isn't a sales pitch, but we have customers who invest in them and it makes a difference. In fact, I think to get the good bulk mailing rate from the Postal Service, you need to prove an NCOA like once a year, I believe is the policy. Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, if that's wrong, if you know, but so
every 90 days.
Costs. Every 90 days? Okay,
it has to be, I should say it this way, your most recent NCOA has to be no older than 90 days from the time you drop it in the mail.
Okay, and so that cost and savings, depending on your list, may offset the cost. Not to mention, the response rate should improve, right? Because you're actually delivering mail to those people. So that's a good thing to do. That may help that lapsed rate. And then the other thing is the cease suppression, very similar to an NCOA, but it'll tell you if anyone in your database has passed away and you can stop mailing them, right? Because that's a wasted effort in some cases. If a surviving household member is getting mail from you all the time to their deceased spouse, that's not going to really endear you to them. So there's a cost savings there, but there's also a stewardship opportunity. So we've had customers that have invested in that to send condolence notes. We had a customer who did that. They sent some condolence notes, and there was a husband who wrote back because the wife had passed away. And he said, oh, I had no idea we were even donating, because it usually is the woman in a mixed gender household that's making those decisions. He said, I had no idea. And he enclosed a check in that letter and said, keep it going. I want to keep donating. I want to keep that legacy going. Now, I'm not saying that you are hitting these people up for money, but it's a stewardship opportunity. And especially for those surviving household members, if you have that information. hey, we're so sorry to hear from your loss. She was a great supporter of us. Let us know if we can do anything. So again, good opportunity there. Beyond the data cleanliness, it could be a stewardship opportunity there. So don't totally give up on people. I wouldn't keep donors from like the Eisenhower administration. There is a limit to this for sure. But maybe a little elbow grease can fix some of these people and bring them back into the fold here. So that's it from me. Segmentation, first-time donors, the storytelling, the impact, surveys, if you want to dip your toes into those, donate to yourself and look at that kind of automatic electronic stewardship. Maybe there's some improvements there. And then just the stewardship, phone calls, maybe carving out some time there. There's a couple things maybe you can try if you're feeling a little overwhelmed. And there's tons of people like me that are always saying no one's doing enough, but one or two things, try it, because I think it'll have an impact. So all the research I mentioned and kind of the examples, there's lots more on our website. Bloomerang, if you need software, we're pretty easy to find. Tell them I sent you, tell them Jennifer sent you. We'll cut you a good deal, of course. And then, connect with me. LinkedIn, Twitter, email, I'm pretty easy to find, because if I put out, new research pretty regularly and share stuff, you'll see that. So, any questions so far from the crew, Jennifer and Cynthia? I can hang out a little while if you want.
Oh, there we are. I was just going to ask if you could for a few minutes so that we could open this up for questions. Usually I'm not the only person like putting things in chat, which makes me think a lot of folks may be on the phone. So if folks would like to unmute themselves to ask Stephen any individual questions, now's a great time to do so.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, the timeline. I think probably that new donor timeline. Let me go back to it, Kayla. Oh no, I closed it. And we'll get you the slides for sure, but yeah, here you go. Yeah.
This is great.
And again, your mileage may vary, it's not going to apply universally to everybody, but download it or write it out in Excel and kind of move things around or whatever. I think the big thing is, first-time donors, sometimes they get stuff from us that they're not ready for. And, it's like you donate on August 26th and, oh, dang, we've got a fall appeal going out September 1st. They may get that appeal before they even get thanked for that first gift. I think that's another reason why maybe those first-time rates are so low, is like people just get lumped into whatever ongoing thing, and you gotta kind of protect them a little bit and put them on their own little highway for at least a little while. Yeah, I love what you said, Jennifer, about hanging on to those people too long. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when organizations are starting out, or maybe they're mature organizations, but they haven't been doing private fundraising for a long time, Stephen, I'll see that they have a small donor list, but that doesn't mean that it's not mighty. And what I'll see though is, like, if a client only has, let's say, 800 to 1,000 people in their database, I suggest, until they really know people, like, don't worry about segmentation, because for now the cost of reaching donors is usually low enough that it's about increasing your volume to actually engage them in different ways and to do your research and then to learn more about who they are and then begin segmenting. But if you are going to segment with a list that size, especially if you don't know anything about the donors, really, then the amount of time since last gift is typically what I recommend being something to really look at. And that would of course apply to new donors as well. But
I totally agree that timing way better than the dollar amount, because those low dollar donors, you never know, right? You can't really judge a book by its cover. Like, I think that's right on. Yeah.
Well, and what we actually do know about those low dollar donors is that if they're consistent low dollar donors, those are your plan givers. Your plan givers are usually not the people who give 10 to 25 grand a year.
Absolutely.
Right. The psychology of a major gift donor and a planned giving donor are generally different. There is some overlap. But when organizations just make sort of categorical decisions that they're just no longer going to mail to anyone who doesn't give at least $50,
that's a killer.
It's a killer. It's a killer for your long-term pipeline, and it's so much better to retain those donors than to try to find new ones. Especially given that a lot of those people, if they're giving regularly, like even if they're just giving $25 once a year, but they've been giving for 20 years, they're your planned giving donors.
Yeah, that's what Panis found. It was like, oh, $20 a year for many decades, and suddenly it was $2 million in bequests, right?
Right.
Yeah. And this manifests for new donors too. It's like most new donors don't give at capacity, right? I mean, why would they? They haven't built that relationship, and you haven't proven yourself to them necessarily. So I think that first time rate is low because people get like $10 and they're like, oh, it's just $10. I'm going to ignore that and focus on major donors. And that, you want to focus on major donors, but you never know who those people are going to be. I think dollar amount is not a great way to segment. I'm totally with you, Jennifer.
I think we had someone with their literal hand up, so I'm unmuting so that she can ask a question. Satveer?
Hi, thanks, Jennifer. So you're talking about much larger databases and much larger amounts of money that our small little nonprofit gets. I mean, I'm so delighted that I have one person. We also have a really unique nonprofit where there's multiple programs, and people choose often to donate to a program they like. So for instance, I am so happy that I have someone who donates $200 every month to one of the programs. Okay.
Nice.
But we can't afford a mail campaign or any of that stuff. So that's my problem with taking some of this information. It does make it easier to do personal thank yous when there is a donation, even if it's some kind of an in-kind donation, because that's a whole nother thing we didn't even talk about, is in-kind donations of time or equipment or things, But anyway, I just want to mention that because when you have all the data that you've been sharing, I'm wondering also the size of the nonprofits that are being looked at in the research. I'd be really interested to see research solely for nonprofits that have budgets of under 100,000, which is where we are. That's our category. So I just want to put a couple, see if you have commentary about what I've
I think you're in good company, Satveer. I think the personal thank yous is awesome. Keep doing that. And then the fact that people are choosing a program, that's a great basis for segmentation, even at the small volume that you have. And I say small, not small and mighty for sure. That one person giving $200 a month to that specific program, probably going to want to tell stories about just that program, right? You might not want to be telling them about the other programs necessarily. So that's I think where you can take the segmentation advice and put it to work. And I'm sure you're already doing something like that at least. But I don't be discouraged by being small. I mean, a lot of the Bloomerang folks are right there with you. And the personal thank yous would be the number one thing I recommend. So you're already ahead of the game by doing that. So yeah, I think you're right on there. But yeah, you've got an awesome opportunity to really target that storytelling because you know exactly which program they're interested in. And you might also want to tell them about the other programs just so they kind of understand the total breadth of your organization. But I think for the most part, you want to update them on those things. So yeah, I think you're in good shape, honestly.
Satbir, I'm happy to talk with you further too about segmentation strategies. You know, if for organizations that are not generally doing a lot of mailing, you know, there's still different ways that you can segment, if you will, through email and social media, and even through text or phone. So don't think that because you're small and you're not mailing that there's no ways to go about doing that, because there are, and they can be highly effective. In fact, you know, a bird at another CRM company did tell me that, you know, one of the things that's coming down the pike, and some are already utilizing or, you know, researching it, is the use of social media IMing in order to reach donors. And a lot of that's going to be, you know, there's going to be a certain aspect of it that is going to use AI to automatically generate, in essence, conversations with donors. But one of the things that we've seen in the industry is that social media IM gets like almost 100% of people, like in the 90%, if people read their individual messages on social media, but only a certain percent, and it's in the 30s, open any given email at any given time. So, you know, that can be another strategy to add into your segmentation and to your donor outreach, is individually messaging people through Facebook, like your organization's friends on Facebook, or Twitter, or whatever other you know, profile you're using, and you could consider that part of your overall strategy.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's a good idea. I know that I tried an experiment this year, because every year I do a fundraiser for my daughter's birthday for community conversations. And I think it's reasonably successful, anywhere from $150 to $350. I'm always surprised. So that's something, if you're going to do a fundraiser on Facebook, look at the donations, because it often identifies who donated, so that I can thank them, you know. But I decided to do one for my birthday, which is the month right after. And I've never done that, because I thought, oh, I'm just going to fatigue people. Well, it brought in, bees brought in a certain amount of money, and then mine brought in like 3 times as much money. It was like very interesting how people responded. People I didn't know also. I mean, I maybe know them on Facebook, but I don't know them. So sometimes taking a risk like that is worthwhile. You know.
And I think, to Stephen's point, you know, they you got that response because they know or think they know you. So I think similar to those memorial gifts, you know, people are making a gift because, you know, they think they know you, they've seen you on Facebook, they like you enough, and it's your birthday or whatever that is, you know. I don't know, Stephen, what's your take on that?
I love it. I love the, peer-to-peer is so good. I mean, it's, and Satbir, maybe if there's other people in the orbit of your organization that you could say like, hey, you know, is your birthday coming up? Would you be willing to do a birthday fundraiser for us? And just get a bunch of people doing that. Yeah. And that's a couple $100, you know, every time. That adds up. And it also will make those supporters who are raising the money feel good, right? Because, oh, dang, I'm helping this organization I love. So not only are you getting kind of some free money from those donors, but also increasing the engagement with the people who are doing the fundraising as well. So it's like a double impact there. And I think that's an ideal strategy for a small organization like you, like yours. And it is a form of segmentation, to Jennifer's point. You can do it.
Well, since nobody else seems to be talking, I'll say one more thing. I'm working with Veterans for Peace and Gamers for Peace recently, and they're really encouraging us to do a stream TV with them on Twitch and Discord. And I'm really excited about this, because this could well replace having to doing a mail campaign. It could well, you know, I mean, there wouldn't be the same kind of active buttons that there are on our web page, say, for donation. But I'm kind of excited about it, as, you know, kind of like the IM thing that Jennifer talked about. But I think that this could even potentially reach a larger audience. You know, because people come to our website, it's small and it's not very creative. It's, you know, I mean, it's nice, but it's not constantly updated or anything, because we don't have anyone to do it. At the same time, people will call me because they've seen my name and number on the website, wanting to talk about the state of peace and their anxiety about it, and how, you know, they'll just, I mean, I'd never asked them for money at that stage, but, you know, I think that it's surprising how something like the name, like the Culture of Peace Alliance, can be a window into people's hope. Just the, you know, the name of it, you know. So I'm going to think about all that you've offered and take Jennifer up on talking and just see what can emerge. Yeah,
the live streaming thing is huge. There's millions of dollars flowing through those live streams. So if you get an invite, I'd jump at that. Yeah, that's cool.
Other thoughts or questions for Stephen as we wrap up today? And Stephen, I know that it's a little after hours there for you, so thanks so much for
That's okay. I'm not going
with
anywhere.
us.
I rode my bike and it's monsooming out, so
Oh my
I'm not going
goodness.
anywhere. So this has been actually really good for me. So thanks for the invite.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, connect with me and we can keep the conversation going. But thanks for hanging out, all of you. This is fun.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being our presenter today. I'm just delighted you were able to join us. What a true gift for everyone on the call. Stephen's really in the know in the industry. So
well, you all have been putting on some great webinars. So thanks for doing that too.
Thank you. I'm sure Stephen remains available. He's very accessible on social media and by email. If you have any questions or want to connect with him directly, please do so. Thanks so much for joining us today. It was lovely to see you and to have time to talk about donor retention. And if you have any questions or if we can be of help, you're welcome to reach out to me or Cynthia as well. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Oh, wait a minute. Before I let you go, let's plug our next presentation. Cynthia, you want to do that?
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Let me just pull up my calendar. All right, so our next presentation will be September 9th, and that will be...
I'm pretty sure it's Jeffrey Lynn.
It's Jeffrey Lynn. That will be branding with Jeffrey Lynn from, what's her company?
From Blaze Experts.
From Blaze Experts. They are a marketing agency. And so she'll be talking about how to brand yourself, your organization on a budget, and some tips and tricks on how to brand yourself better and make yourself more visible as an organization.
And for those of you who are still left, just one more plug in this, we work with folks who we invite to provide our presentation. So these are not cold. And in Jeffrey's case, she and her company are working with us on a complete rebranding, and our new website should go live before her next presentation. So keep your eye out for their actual work and then join us. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.